Coming to you from Rochester, Minnesota,
Even when you fall in love completely,
our town.
if something doesn't go sweetly, want to get on together. When life asks a million questions, we'll find the answers.
Welcome to Our Town, the show about Rochester. I'm Danielle Teal, and this month's Our Town has us bringing you candidate discussions for the Rochester City Council races. Today, we take a break to focus on the voting and what options are available for us to cast our votes. We're joined today by Katie Smith, Olmsted County's election specialist. Hi, Katie. Welcome back to Our Town.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me again.
So excited to dive right into this with you because I myself went online 2 days ago and I submitted for my absentee ballot. So it's going to be nice to share about that experience, but also dig deeper into the options for people as far as voting goes. So first, how busy is it right now for you?
Yeah, this year is so unique with COVID-19. We are seeing a huge influx in absentee voting. So for instance, we have sent out 48,614 total requests for absentee ballots, and we've already received back in 25,572 of those.
Wow, I have goosebumps. And there's over 100,000 people in the population in Rochester alone.
Yeah, actually, that is a record that we just broke as a county for our total number of registered voters. We topped over 100, so we're at 101,120 as of last week.
That's incredible. So let's talk about the steps on the voting process so our listeners and viewers can better understand how that works. How can voters cast their ballot before the November election? And what early voting options are available? Like polls are open now, mail-in options, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a whole lot of different options, each with their own unique nuances. So for instance, everyone's probably familiar with election day voting, which is on November the 3rd, and you would need to look up and go to your correct polling location. If you want to vote early, you can do so in person, and that's at our absentee office at 2122 Campus Drive. There is a form that you would need to fill out. You can either complete it ahead of time and bring it with you, or fill it out when you get here to receive a ballot. We're also going to have an additional pop-up voting location for in-person voting starting on October the 27th, and that's at the Government Center. So you can vote in person in either of those two locations that week, and that's a process called direct balloting that starts then, where instead of folding your ballot into an envelope, you can go ahead and put it directly into a tabulator. And then there is that mail option to vote by mail. You can still continue to request an absentee ballot to be mailed to your house. We do want everybody to take into consideration that it has to make its way to you and then back to us here at our office. It would have to be postmarked before Election Day or by Election Day, and then it would have to be received back by 1 week following Election Day. So keep that time frame in mind. There's also the option, if you've received your ballot by mail, to drop it off directly to us, and you can do that either at the elections office on Campus Drive, or you can also turn it in at the info desk at the Government Center.
And of course, COVID-19 precautions are in place, correct, Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. You'll see such things as like all of our staff wearing masks, and we have shields in between voters and our election judge trained staff anywhere where you're having a long time point of contact with us, 6 foot social distancing markers, clean pens, extra sanitation, those kinds of things that if you voted during the August primary, similar to that experience.
Now, you mentioned Melon Voting, and this is something, the absentee ballots, that I want to kind of talk about, because that experience was actually really fluid for me when I went online to request my absentee ballot. I was also really impressed that they asked for a driver's license. So, you know, there's a lot of controversy around the Melon ballots and across the nation. It's a hot topic. What are you all doing to make sure that there's credibility and authenticity in that regard? Granted, the license request is on there, but reconciling that on your end.
Yeah, there's a lot of checks and balances that kind of happen here in the office, more behind the scenes. Every ballot here, we just have the absentee process for our mailing ballots back and forth. You may see other things in the news about mail balloting. That's a completely separate process. There are some instances where various townships or small cities can qualify for that process, but we don't have any of those here in Olmsted County. We just have this process of absentee. So it's always a solicited ballot. So someone would have had to request that ballot. They provide us with information like the last four of their social or their driver's license number, or if they fill out a paper application, then we also have their signature on file. So as those ballots then are coming back into our office, we scan them in and we do a process called ballot boarding, where we make sure that the person that we sent that ballot out to is who in fact returned that ballot. We compare the ID number. If we need to, we can pull that paper app and compare a signature. All those ballots then are scanned in and tracked, and we generate a report every day, and we make sure that the number of ballots that we have on hand matches the number of ballots that we have accepted in. So we count those 25,572 ballots every morning.
Wow. And you have enough resources and staff to do this?
Yeah, we do. We have extra staff, obviously, this year because of COVID and the influx of absentee. Yeah.
You know, I saw recently in Iowa that there was some controversy about some of the ballots that were invalidated. How are we preventing that from happening in Olmsted County?
Yeah, so I think what you're referencing is that someone must have sent out absentee applications with that information already filled out on there.
Correct.
That's not a process that happens here locally. Any application that you receive isn't going to have your private identification number pre-filled in. That's something that we elicit from our voters so that then we can compare it during that ballot board process. So that is not a process that happens here locally.
Great. Why is there such a big push for early voting?
You know, we've seen just a really big trend in the increase of absentee voting. Even without the influx with COVID-19, we were already expecting a pretty high turnout. Just because of the convenience of it, that you have that whole 46-day window versus just having to show up at your particular poll location on election day. So that convenience factor of it was already playing into a natural increase, and especially since Minnesota changed over to no excuse absentee voting, to where you don't have to provide an excuse, like you don't have to have been away from the state to be able to participate in that. So it was already naturally kind of trending that way, and then COVID certainly ramped that up quite a bit.
You know, it's interesting because I think between, you know, there's different groups that definitely have a ritual of going on site on November 3rd to vote. I know that I love doing that. I love getting my voter sticker. Is a little minor detail, but are people still getting those stickers if they mail in their ballots or do the early voting?
We have those stickers available here at our office.
Okay.
People are coming up to the drop box. I do see a few come in and get a sticker from us. We're trying to keep that as hands-off as possible and not, you know, obviously you don't have to take the sticker. So we leave that up to the voter if they would like to request one of those.
Okay, I'm gonna need to stop by and get my sticker when I get this done. So the perfect segue into the next question. If you go in person, what can voters expect to see at their polling place? What will be the same and what will be different?
Yeah, so it's going to look pretty similar if you voted in the August primary, as far as all of those like sanitization standards and the plexiglass shields and masks and 6-foot social distancing. If you didn't vote in August, it's going to look drastically different than maybe what you've experienced in 2018 or 2016 or other general elections, because we will have those extra precautions because of COVID-19 this year. But the overall process isn't intimidating. It is the same. You come in, you check in, you'll get your ballot, and you'll get your sticker.
Do you have enough election judges to staff the polling places?
You know, all of the election judges in Olmsted County aren't hired on by the county. They're hired on by each individual municipality. So for instance, your local clerk's office or your local township clerk is the person responsible for staffing the polls on election day. I communicate with them regularly and they are all fully staffed, which is very good to hear this year.
Is there anything that people need to bring in addition to just showing up when they come to vote?
You know, no, not unless you need to register. If you need to register as a part of the voting process, you'll need to bring with you one of those various 7 different forms of identification to be able to register at the polls. It's such things as a current identification that has your correct address on it, an old identification that has your photo to pair with, for instance, like a bill that has your correct address. So something we always call it your face and your place, something to show who you are and where you live. And then there's some other options. Those are all on mnvotes.org, such as having someone that you know in your precinct vouch for you or those kinds of things.
What are some rules that people are not supposed to do at the polling place?
Some rules of what they're not supposed to do?
Right. I mean, can I wear a shirt saying who I'm voting for, or, you know?
Right. Yeah. No, everybody is very civic minded this year, and it's a big election. But we do have those campaigning rules. So we ask that you not wear anything, even if it's just a little button or a hat that has any campaign related materials on it, supporting either your candidate or your cause when you come to vote.
You know, the COVID-19 has really changed the environment and connections related to this. How is the county prepared for not only the influx in mail-in ballots, but also the in-person voting? You know, how is that going to be impacted, and are you prepared for that? Because this is a quite contentious election, not only from, you know, the national level, but you know, state and local. So how will the county mitigate that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've hired on more additional staffing. Happy to say so far, no promises during direct balloting week because we're going to get really busy. We haven't had a line that's taken over 15 minutes so far. So that's pretty impressive compared to years past. We are trying to, you know, keep those lines down, move people through the process as quickly as possible, keep up with the social distancing and not have everybody, you know, compiled in one location for too terribly long. We do have all of those additional standards, like I had mentioned previously, with sanitizing and such. So yeah, between, you know, the extra staffing and the preparations, those kinds of things are kind of mitigating those issues of COVID-19 this year. Such an influx of absentee voting. There's still going to be a lot of turnout at the polls, and Minnesota, obviously, they always have a really high voter turnout, but that did take some of the people away from the polls because they've chosen instead to vote absentee. So.
Thank you so much. We'll be right back to hear more from Katie Smith, Olmsted County Election Specialist. Stay tuned.
Our Town is brought to you in part by the following amazing people and organizations:
the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, and the citizens of Minnesota.
And the members of KSMQ Public Television. Thank you.
Want to see who's on your ballot? Check it out and more at mnvotes.org.
When it's all said and done, somehow, someway, someday, I'll be standing here with you, won't make mistakes.
For more information about this story and other Our Town features, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter at KSMQ #OurTown, or ksmq.org/OurTown.
A little bit of love that got us through. A little bit of love that got us through. No one said it would be simple, but that's not gonna stop me. No, just following our impulse.
Welcome back. Today we're joined by Katie Smith, election specialist with Olmsted County, to get us primed for the elections and voting. She is the woman that you need to connect with if you have any questions related to voting, but we're here to help you and keep you informed. Okay, Katie, we were just talking about how the county has prepared for COVID-19 restrictions and getting people at the polling places to vote, but also for mail-in ballots. How have you protected and prepared your team in those dynamics to keep them safe as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We're following a lot of those same standards that we're doing on behalf of the voters. We're sanitizing our workspaces. We're trying to maintain social distance as best we can, even though we do always have to have 2 people with every ballot. We're all wearing masks and just trying to stay safe on our end as well as protect all of our voters.
That's awesome. And, it's getting so close. November 3rd seems just right around the corner. What are some really critical deadlines for voters that they should be aware of ahead of Election Day on November?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are looking to return your ballot via our drop box or dropping it off to us at the government center, the deadline to do so is 3 p.m. on Election Day. Anything that's an absentee ballot has to actually come back to the elections office. So if you got your ballot mailed to you at home and you're going to drop it off, your polling place is not the place to drop that. It would be here at the elections office or at the government center information desk. So that's one key piece of information to keep in mind. Also, our registration process cutoff has actually come and gone, but don't worry, that doesn't mean that you can't still vote on Election Day. In Minnesota is an Election Day registration. It's just one little extra step that you'll have to take at the polls to register to vote if you have had either an address or a name change.
And how engaged is Olmsted County with the percentage of residents actually voting? I know that you mentioned some of those have already been submitted, and we have had some record as far as the percentage of go. Can you break that down for us? What is the usual percentage, and how's it looking differently now?
Yeah, so for instance, for the number of people who voted by absentee in 2018 and 2016, we surpassed those total numbers last week, and
Wow.
Yeah, we're still a few weeks away from Election Day, and a part of that is that final week of direct balloting where you can feed it into the tabulator. So that's normally in the absentee office here, our busiest week, and that's still yet to come. So it's definitely a record-breaking year, and we're certainly here to help answer questions or explain all of the various ways to vote. Certainly anything, if you find it confusing or if you have any questions, reach out to us here at the elections office, and we can walk you through those options and see what works best for you. And there's some other things that we didn't even touch on, like voting curbside, where we could come out and help you at your vehicle if you're not able to come inside, or if you have no way to request your ballot get sent to you in time, you can designate someone as your agent to come and get your ballot and bring it back to you. There's just a whole lot of options out there, and we're certainly willing to talk through all of those options with you. And of course, Election Day voting as well. That's still upcoming and the big day, and we're all looking forward to it.
Are there any resources that people can get rides or anything like that if they want to go on site and they don't have transportation?
We are right here along the bus stop, and I'd certainly be willing to try to see if I can set somebody up with someone that knows a little bit more about that than I do.
Awesome. How many new voters are there that have registered for this election? Do you know that for Olmsted County?
I don't offhand. I know that I believe we were at about 89,000 or 90,000 in 2018, and now we've topped 100, just for an example.
Okay, for what exactly is that number?
Of registered voters.
Okay, total number of registered voters, and you don't know yet what that number looks like for new voters.
I don't. I haven't run those numbers.
That would be really interesting to find out. So if you're able to get that would be great. Okay, where can people go to get information or resources related to all things voting? And then also, I think, understanding the voting process, the actual ballot, how you fill it out, all that.
Yeah, absolutely. mnvotes.org, which would be the Secretary of State's office election website. It's a really good resource for all things voting. It's where you can go and find out if you're already registered to vote. You can go on there and request your absentee ballot. You can see a copy of your sample ballot, which is going to be exactly what your ballot's going to look like when you do get to the polls or when you do request it or come in absentee. So it's a really good site. You can also look up where do you vote on Election Day, and through some of those options that I just kind of touched on of various ways to vote.
Are the polling places still reduced after the primary? Did any townships lose a polling place or anything like that?
All of the polling locations are exactly the same as they were for the primary in August. If you didn't participate in the primary in August, you might want to go on and double check and make sure of where your polling location is for Election Day. There were a few that did change because of COVID-19 because they became not available.
After all that's kind of happened thus far, are there any lessons learned or things that your team would do differently in the next election, or have you even had time to reflect on that yet?
There's just been so many changes, and I feel like we've adapted really well, but there's things that we've really liked that we would like to keep going for years going forward, even in the non-COVID years. The option to have some online training for our election judges was really well received, and we'd like to afford them that opportunity in the future. And some of our practices here to narrow our lines down and make our process as streamlined as possible have worked out really well. And we want to keep those things going even after COVID finally comes to a close.
Okay. Sort of a controversy question, but I think it's a good one that is on people's minds. Do you think online voting is going to happen, given what is occurring now in the future?
That's probably a state level question, but
Right.
I know here in Minnesota, there is a whole lot of checks and balances and integrity behind the scenes, and we do have those paper ballots. So, we don't have voting machines where everything's electronic. We don't have our voting machines connected or in any way touching the internet. We have a lot of behind the scenes security. So I guess personally, I don't see that being an option, at least not for a long time.
Are you aware if there's in-depth discussions and that being pursued at a legislative level and where it's at as far as that goes?
Not that I've heard of, but that's probably outside of my scope.
Yeah. You don't want to add one more thing, right, Katie? Can you imagine all these possible votes and then trying to validate that afterwards? That would be interesting. What is a bit of advice for new voters that may not be familiar with the process or understanding how voting works beyond what they learned in school? What do you recommend they should look to gain that information?
Yeah, I would say that the website resource, the edmondvotes.org, is going to answer a lot of your questions. Feel free to reach out to your local county office. If you live in Olmsted, that would be me here, or your local county office in your county. And then don't feel intimidated in any way by the process. You're going to meet somebody like me when you come into the office, and we'll walk you through the whole thing. Or if you get yours by mail and you have questions, give us a call. We'll walk you through what you need to do. Or if you go to your polling place, your election judges would love to help you figure out that process along the way.
Given the situation with schools, school-age kids and teens, there used to be some engagement at the schools, and they would have a pretend ballot and they would vote and that sort of thing. Is there anything being done right now given those restrictions?
Not this year with COVID. We haven't had a whole lot of outreach going on like we may have in years past, but certainly something we'd welcome in years coming.
And then are there ways to reach the population that don't regularly vote? Have you done something different to encourage voting for that population?
As far as voter outreach go, there's a whole lot of organizations here in town that I know are focusing on that, and we certainly are providing information and resources and answering questions for a lot of those nonprofits and local agencies, and trying to be as open as we can and provide as much data as we can as anybody's requesting.
Katie, you're awesome. Is there anything else you want to share related to getting ready to vote on November 3rd and before then?
Not that I can think of. I think that the big one that I did want to mention to everybody was to make sure if you requested your ballot at home and you're wanting to drop it off, to bring it to your county office and not to your polling place, because those are two separate ways to vote.
Okay, that is a good clarification. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Katie. You are a tremendous asset to the community, and we're grateful for your service.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you. We'll see you next time on Our Town, the show about Rochester.
All I know, all I know, all I know, all I know is I got you, baby. All I know, all I know, when it's all said and done. Somehow, someway, someday, I'll be standing here with you. We'll make mistakes, but hey, at least I'll make them with you. When life's not great, that's okay, 'cause no matter what we do, a little bit of me, a little bit of you, and a little bit of love again is true. 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 A little bit of love again is true.
Our Town is produced by KSMQ Public Television, nonprofit, non-commercial. Please help pay for this programming by making a personal contribution at ksmq.org. Thank you.
You can access more information about KSMQ on Facebook and at ksmq.org.